right, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started as a few folks are trickling in here. My name is Nicole Barbera. I'm the Director of Communications, Marketing, and Events here at Heterodox Academy. And thank you so much to everyone who is joining us today. We're really excited about all these member workshops that we've been having the last few months. They've been, resulting in great turnout and, really helpful information for everyone. So appreciate you being here. All of you are members, so I don't have to convince you that to join HXA, but if you do have any colleagues that you think might be interested who are not members yet, we always appreciate some member recommendations to join, especially with these kind of new professional development perks that we're offering as part of this workshop series. So today I'm really excited. We have a wonderful workshop here on having better conversations, which I think will be a pertinent topic as we go over the next few weeks here and beyond for the academic year. And so I'm really happy to introduce Dr. Douglas Lepisto. He's the co-director of the Center for Principled Leadership and Business Strategy and the co-director of the Leadership and Business Strategy major at Western Michigan University. And Western Michigan University, nice shout out, is one of our largest campus communities and largest membership universities in the country. So go Western Michigan. His expertise centers on how leaders can create high performance organizations through people and strategy. His research has received several awards and has appeared in top management journals, including Administrative Science Quarterly and Academy of Management Journal. He regularly gives talks based on his research to academics and executives and has been invited to speak at companies such as Google. Prior to academia, he worked on strategy as a management consultant with the Monitor Group and strategic planning with the advertising firm Young and Rubicam. He is also the founder and managing partner of Sleeping Giant Capital, a long-term investment fund that backs principled leaders in acquiring closely held West Michigan businesses. So today, I'm really excited to introduce him and have him lead this workshop on building swift, meaningful connections through structured conversations. And with that, I will hand the floor over to Doug. He's going to spend, some time presenting today, and we'll have some time at the end also for discussion, question and answer, and anything else that you all want to conversate with him. So, Doug, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much for the introduction, and great to see all of you. I have, I think, 6 slides to talk through, as well as the facilitation guide that I use for the moving conversation exercise. We'll also have a document on how to facilitate one of these moving conversations in either your class, it works in sports teams, other organizational settings. So I'll start sharing my screen here. All right. So I'm going to go through the first origin of this exercise and how it came to be. I think there's a lot of really great tools out there for having difficult conversations, conversations across differences. And this exercise really is something that precedes those. And it's an exercise that can be done absent any kind of difficult conversation or conversation across divides. So the motivation for this exercise and where did it come from? What were we trying to do? So back in 2020, actually 2019, I ran a session at the Academy of Management in Boston, which was it's the big gathering of business school professors focused on management, organizations, strategy. And my colleague, JP Stevens here and I put on this session, and you can see everybody in the room. And the session we organized was really based on some of our shared interest on ritual. And we got a great response to that session because there was just a real electricity in the room, real sense of togetherness, and we just got really good feedback. And after we did that session, 2020 happened and George Floyd. And JP and I got back into touch with one another, and we wrote a blog on sharing experiences and emotion amidst racial unrest. I put the link to that blog post at the top. And one thing we observed as that time was happening was there were different worlds that people were engaging. There was the world of culture where people were engaging around symbols, kneeling, narratives. There was the world of data and there was discussion around the number of arrests, different data on discrimination. There was also the world of social structure. So, how different groups were actually related to one another, ties, networks. And then the final one that people were sharing during this time was the world of lived experience and experiences that they had based on their race and the emotions that they felt. And one thing that we observed was that when people engaged, they were engaging in these four different worlds, and they were sometimes talking over one another. And someone sharing data around the number of arrests, for instance, may not speak to a world of lived experience where people feel certain emotions, and they have a lived experience that data may not correspond to. And so we focused in that article or in that blog post on just the importance of being able to share emotion with one another and how powerful that can be in terms of bridging across divides and bridging across different lived experiences. And it was from that I developed this exercise called Moving Conversations. It was a confluence both of the event that I ran with JP as well as the blog post. And the moving conversation exercise is something that I've developed here and used, I don't even know how many times, maybe 20, 30 times. I've done this in a variety of cases, but it's a great exercise for starting to have a moving conversation, a conversation where you're able to share your experience, share a little bit about your identity, and share your emotion. And it works in a lot of different contexts. So I found this exercise most helpful at the beginning of a semester in a class because it really helps set the tone and a level of disclosure, a level of vulnerability, a level of authenticity that it kind of can create in a classroom. I've done this. You could also use this as an exercise. Maybe if you've gone into your semester and you want to build some tight connections. If you put students into teams, it's a great exercise before you allocate them to teams. It works in athletic environments. I've done it with faculty and staff in a really interesting way. And really, any occasion you want to have as a meaningful connection with someone else. I thought the most inspiring thing for me from the exercise has been when fraternities or sororities, especially fraternities, have actually taken this exercise and brought it into their fraternity to be able to relate to one another in a new way. And the reaction I get from students is really positive. I typically get a reaction that they haven't had this kind of conversation in a while, but they wish that they did more often, and that it's a really fun, engaging kind of experience. So the exercise I'm going to dive into is really pretty simple. It's an exercise that you can do in about 40 minutes, and it's got some key components here that I'll walk through. And all you really need to have in terms of preparation, which I'll talk about in the facilitation, is essentially just the print off of this exercise and a stopwatch. So it's really easy to administer. Let me jump into the exercise itself. Did everyone see this okay? So the moving conversations process is a 40-minute scripted conversational guide. And as you can see, it's a little bit of a preamble, and then you start the conversation. And each section has about the amount of time that it should take and specific steps of turn taking that you're going to do in terms of asking one another questions, as well as some actions. So the first section is 5 questions, and it's really just an opening greeting. And it's important that when folks go through this exercise that they follow it each step by step and they do so carefully and deliberately. Is there any magic in doing that way? Not really, But what it does do is when you give folks a script that they know what's going to happen and they have to follow the rules, it takes some of the awkwardness of trying to keep the conversation going. You have a guide that you can all go back to. You know that you don't need to, go to places you don't want to go or feel awkward trying to make small talk when you don't need to. It's like, hey, we're here to do an exercise. We have to follow the steps. And so you'll notice in the first questions, they kind of get progressively offer more disclosure. And when they complete the section, they move on to the next section. So that next section, following that is a special connecting exercise. So in this exercise, this part of the thing, they're going to engage in eye gazing. So they're first going to sit with their eyes closed for a minute, and they're going to feel compassion for their partner. And then once their timer goes off, they're going to open their eyes. They're going to set their timer for 2 minutes, and then they're just going to gaze into the other person's eyes for 2 minutes. They'll then create a secret handshake that they do together. And then they'll move into the following section, which is the core conversation that lasts about 15 minutes. So they start off with something that kind of is superficial. They then do something that's a little bit strange, a little bit outside of the norms. They're breaking expectations with, having to hold their eyes. They're feeling uncomfortable. There's laughter. There's sometimes there's crying. Everybody's kind of uncomfortable during this phase. And then they come up with some secret handshake and they're all laughing. They're all laughing and they've created something fun. The core conversation then is 15 minutes, and there's 3 subsections there, which they describe kind of what the last few months have been like for them in terms of their emotion. They talk a little bit about things that have brought them inspiration and hope, and they talk a little bit about connection with their friends and meaningful conversations they've had. They then return to the connecting exercise, and they close their eyes for 1 minute, feeling the emotions of the other person while their eyes are closed. And then they open their eyes and they engage in eye gazing for 2 minutes. They then wrap up the conversation with a personal appreciation. They share one takeaway about what they've learned with the other person, and they do their secret handshake again. So these are happening in dyads. And so what's optional in this exercise is you can bring those dyads into a foursome. And there, each in that 4, they then take turns sharing what they had for breakfast, a we statement, and where they grow up and what they like best about growing up. And then each person in that 4 shares something they admire about their conversation partner from the previous exercise. It's a way of kind of introducing something new about their partner to the other 3 people in their group. And then the foursome takes their 2 secret handshakes and combines them into a new handshake that all 4 of them have created, and they share their contact information. And so this is how I form teams in my classes. Is they go from the 2 to a 4. I've never gone from 4 to 8, but you probably could. But that gives them a way to extend beyond the dyad. I'm going to jump back here into the slides here. So I have another version of this, which it's not quite ready to share, but I'll share it out through the Heterodox folks about a actual card version that allows people to flip between each section. So a little bit of why is this designed the way that it is, and what are the principles that I think make it effective in terms of creating a moving conversation. The first thing is it begins from the premise that if you're going to have a difficult conversation, if you can start with some intimacy and humanity of sharing emotion and experience, that's the best way to start before you get into anything difficult. And again, this exercise doesn't need to have a difficult conversation that follows it. It can be just used on its own. The second thing is that, especially for undergraduates, where I've used this, and probably for all of us, having a moving conversation, a more intimate, maybe deep conversation, can be intimidating. You're not quite sure the rules of the road, what can be said, what not can be said. And the script makes it really safe for people to go down these steps because they know they have a guide that they have to follow. There's progressive interpersonal risk taking. So they start from talking about breakfast to a moment that that defined who they are, their sense of inspiration and hope. And so this notion that they're each taking turns and having some interpersonal risk in terms of disclosure is one way that trust is ultimately built in groups. There's other little moments there where they have to create we statements. So they're trying to establish a momentary kind of shared sense, a shared reality of an emotion that they're both feeling in the room, which is going to help create a sense of solidarity. The eye contact element really facilitates intimacy. If you haven't looked at your partner's eyes for 2 minutes without speaking, I would encourage you to try it because it is a different experience than what we're normally used to, and especially with young people who are on their phones looking down a lot. Eye contact is something that really brings them into the moment in a unique way. I saw some interesting data the other day on eye contact. 50% of employers thought that in job interviews that undergraduates were not well didn't engage in eye contact very effectively. But the other thing that the eye contact exercise does is it really deviates from traditional norms, right? We're not looking into each other's eyes for 2 minutes at a time and not speaking. And so it's a way to kind of break norms and expectations and kind of unfreezes people in a way to say, hey, I can engage in something new. I'm acting in a new way. I'm more likely to share. Secret handshake. Well, an interesting finding. I do a lot of research on ritual. Is that just basic synchronization creates solidarity and connection. And so the handshake works in two ways. One, you're actually creating something together, and when you create together, you're creating you're reducing those boundaries between one another as you build. And the second thing the secret handshake does is it well, there's three things actually. One, you create something new and that promotes intimacy. The second thing it does is the secret handshake marks the two people as having a unique dyad. It's one thing that we uniquely share together. If anybody's seen is LeBron James and he's dabbing people on his team, every handshake is unique to that person, and so it creates a sense of novelty with that one dyad. And then the final thing about a handshake is that anytime you can get rhythmic entrainment between people, um, you know, well documented finding if you just get people to walk in synchrony and march, they feel more connected with one another. The final thing that has been nice is when the teams share something they admire about the other person in public, that really creates positive emotion in the group, and is a great way to kind of build that sense of togetherness. I'm going to go very quickly here through the how to facilitate this. So in terms of materials, and we provide both the conversation guide and a facilitation guide. In terms of materials, all you need to do is make sure you have enough print offs for each person. You need to have a timer on your watch or on your phone. I think background music is really effective. I play just some relaxing jazz music, but let the students maybe even pick the music. It kind of creates this. It just creates a level of comfort, and it takes some of the awkwardness out of it. And then I think in terms of your room layout, you want to make sure that people have a chance to actually face one another. One thing that's interesting about the exercise is if you're doing it in a classroom that has rows or tiers, people will start the exercise like this, and by the end of the conversation, their whole bodies are facing one another because they need to engage in the eye gazing. So make sure you lay the room out where they actually can turn and face. And if you want to do fours where they can get to another set of people who are in the exercise. In terms of facilitation, it's pretty easy. The first thing you need to do is monitor the time. I have 40 minutes is about how long it takes, maybe 45 with the debrief. What you're doing on monitoring time is after you have them start, and the facilitation guide goes into greater detail, you want to make sure that they, if it's about 5 minutes on the connecting exercise, what I do is I kind of flick the lights at about, five. If I kind of look around the room, I'm like, okay, it seems like they maybe have moved on to the next step. I'll flick the lights and I'll call out to people. And I'll say, hey, by now you should be moving on to the next section, the connecting section or whatever that section is, so they know where they are. What you'll find is they'll get just off in conversation and they won't actually move through the exercise. So making sure that they kind of move through the exercise is really important, because otherwise they won't get to each of the parts. And then the final thing is the team part of the exercise is optional. I think it works great for teams, but that's up to you. And then I just ask these. I mean, these are 4 questions on the debrief. You can really take it anywhere you want, but just have them talk about what the experience was like. They'll talk about the eye gazing typically first and how awkward they felt about that. I think it's really interesting and fun to have them talk about the emotions that they felt. Some of the guys that look from guy to guy who are getting in the eye gazing, there's sometimes like anger or, the kind of the domination feelings. I've done this exercise and I get a little bit weepy, but it's just fun to kind of talk about what that means and why is that happening. And then we talk a little bit about, what do they often have these conversations, and if not, would they want more? I think what you're going to find is that they don't have these kinds of conversations very often, and that they really wish they had more of those. But I think they don't know, either they haven't been prompted to, they don't have the occasion to, or they don't have that kind of a comfort script that they can go to. But I typically get a really positive response in wanting to do that more. And then I just try to identify what kind of lessons have they taken from this conversation that they could take into other conversations. We have interesting discussion about presence, about listening, about what feels comfortable for them to share versus not share, what the boundaries are when you're having a moving conversation. And so there's lots of just interesting dialogue. I don't really I don't really go with the debrief as like there's a point to this. We just kind of explore it. If they want to get into the principles and the kind of the science behind why creating leads to co-creating leads to intimacy, then we can talk about those things. But I typically don't debrief that. Um, and that is it. I would say the only other thing that I have done on this facilitation is, and I'll stop sharing my screen here. Actually, I'll pull up why don't I pull up the facilitation guide really quick? Let me share my screen one more time. So this is the facilitation guide. It's very short, gives the materials. It also gives an exercise framing. I think that is actually really important. I won't read this verbatim, but there's a nice long section that just frames out how they need to go through the exercise, what it's about. And I think that piece at the beginning is kind of helps set the tone. I think the only other thing I would add about this exercise is I like to I like to start also by saying that you share whatever you want to share, and you don't share what you don't want to share. And so if nobody's forcing you to talk about anything you don't want to talk about. I think it's also nice to say that you keep everything in confidence in the conversation. That it's a way for people to feel an extra level of comfort being able to engage. So that's the exercise. Happy to take questions from you guys about the exercise, facilitating, anything else.
Thanks, Doug. And for everyone that's here, feel free to pop off mute or raise your hand and we can field questions and discussion that way. Go ahead, Matt.
Yes, Matt.
Hey there. Thanks for the presentation. I was just wondering, I mean, do you, in terms of the the setting the stage beforehand. Something like what you have written here is all you do. That's kind of my question. I guess I'm just wondering, given that this will be so different for a lot of students from what they normally experience, particularly the eye gazing, is there any sort of prefacing in terms of kind of what you shared with us, like, hey, this may be awkward, you may feel this, you may feel this, but stick with it, or whatever the case may be? Or is it just does it work well just going off what basically some version of what you have written here?
Yes, great question. I let it, I asked them not to read ahead, and I want it to be a surprise. And I don't want to frame it by saying, hey, this is going to be an awkward, weird thing you're going to do. I'm just like, hey, this is the easiest thing you need to do. You just need to follow these things and follow these steps, and it's all good. And you're gonna have a great conversation, and they'll get to that, and then the giggles start, the awkwardness starts of how do I handle this. Um, and so I try to keep it really positive. The other thing I like about the eye gazing too, especially at the beginning of the semester, is if you are, I tend to be a professor that's a little bit non-traditional maybe in my approach, and so I like the kind of expectation breaking early, because it kind of gives you a way to say, okay, this is going to be a different kind of class, this is going to be a different kind of experience. um, so that's typically how I do it. Any other questions? Is that Jerome?
Yeah. So thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you so much for the presentation. I found it really interesting. I was curious if you have, given that you've done it 20 or 30 times, ever run into students who have really high levels of social anxiety or perhaps autism. I'm thinking right now, I'm teaching 101, and I have a student who is on the spectrum, and he has a hard time making any eye contact during class. So if you have that situation, have you had it in the past? And if so, how would you facilitate the eye gazing part specifically, but other parts of it that might be uncomfortable for participants?
So not to my knowledge. I mean, it might have happened and I don't know it. Where so that might have happened. Um, I mean, part of the kind of my intuitive response is difficult for everyone. Gazing in anybody's eyes for 2 minutes is difficult for everybody, and everybody's going to feel uncomfortable. And it's kind of something that we're all, and that's part of it's part of what brings them together, is they have a very clear shared emotion of awkwardness, because they've got to look into each other's eyes, and you're like, holy cow. The other thing, and I think it's so important to have that experience, because you realize just how powerful the eyes are. And so when I'm teaching a leadership class and we're talking about presence and we're talking about, engagement, about what you do with your eyes, and being able to hold eye contact, and what that means, I think is such a, it's like tone of voice. It's these other things that we just take for granted that we don't really think about. Um, so that's I haven't run into a situation where that's happened. And I've had a lot of international students as well, where they're like this is very uncomfortable for them, and it's like, yeah, it is uncomfortable for them, and it's uncomfortable for everybody else too. So I just kind of that's how I've handled it. Yeah, Joshua.
I run a peer tutoring center, and a lot of times in our training sessions, I use improv. One of the main ones I use is mirroring, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of this idea of like eye contact. You have to be attentive to what the other person's doing to be able to mirror their movements and things like that. But I'm also thinking like this is more conversational than improv. But I'm what I'm envisioning. I'm going to try this, but I'm going to do them in tandem. Where one is this, like how do we look at the nonverbals, but then also how do we listen to the conversation? How do we create that dialogue? I don't know if my curiosity is if you've ever dabbled with improv or seen how maybe that would work, because I'm going to try it.
I would love to hear how it goes for you. And let me know, because I think that would be a lot of fun. I think doing this before improv makes a lot of sense. Again, you get the awkwardness out. If you can get through the eye gazing thing, then man, you have to think on your feet. It kind of becomes a little bit easier, right? And man, they feel once they get to the first time is always really hard, But then, man, when they start doing the handshake and they're doing their thing, it's like they're bonded because they've just gone through the most awkward, intimate thing together, and it's all it is eye contact. And they then create their thing, and now they're having fun, and then the laughter happens, and especially if the exercise is timed in a certain way where everybody's kind of getting to the eye gazing part at the same time, you'll get like all of a sudden the class will get quiet and everyone's looking at one another, and then all of a sudden these like phones go off, the timers go off, right? And everyone's kind of looking in each other's eyes, and some people they can't hold it together. They're just laughing their butts off. Other people are just staring there and they're just like locked in. But I also make my students sing in class, so they have to sing solo karaoke. So by the time they get done with singing karaoke and eye contact, I'm like, they're ready to take on the world. So
Cool.
good idea. Love to know how it goes.
I'm gonna try it on my wife too, so I'll let you know.
Okay, very good. Yes, Edith.
Hi, I'd just be interested to know if you revised the questions numerous times as you were developing this program.
I did. So when we designed the first draft of this, it was during 2020. And so there was a lot of just emotion during that time period for many reasons. And I realized it was kind of as I've gone through the process that I've made the exercise a little bit more towards the positive rather than where they can disclose more about the positive rather than the negative. And that just is, I think, a more comfortable space for people to be in, more safe to be in. I've also made some of I made it a little bit shorter because you will find that you'll get a couple dyads that will go through this and they'll be done with everybody else. I think most often you'll find people will continue to talk, and it was going way too long. So I had to pare it down to focus it because they would just get kind of carried away. Especially at the beginning. I mean, by the fifth question, you're having to say, a defining moment that shaped who you are. And all of a sudden, boom, you're like way over in like a different zone. So yes, Natalie.
I was wondering if you've collected any data related to retention. Like at my university, we cohort freshmen together in courses in the hopes that they're going to make friends with one another. And, it seems like this would be a great way to facilitate those connections more quickly. So what do you think?
It's a great idea. I have not done that. I did try to bring it during one of our freshman orientation, and for various reasons, we didn't have enough of people there to be able to track it. Man, if we're about open inquiry, constructive disagreement, and viewpoint diversity, and we can't get them comfortable with eye contact, we have a lot of work to do, right? So I like the idea of because some of the pushback I have gotten from some staff members is like, well, this is a little bit too much. Like the eye contact for some people is a little bit too much, and my response is like if we can't deal with eye contact, when we get to difficult conversations about different ideas, that's also going to be uncomfortable. So I think it's a great idea. I would love to do it with freshmen. I'd love to do it with high schoolers. I actually have done it with high schoolers now that I think about it. And I did it. So I have done this online. The eye gazing thing definitely is not as powerful. This has all been in person, but I think doing it with freshmen would be really interesting. Other questions? Peter, have you done or published an evaluation of this technique? I have only anecdotes, Peter, sadly. I would love to collect, rigorous data around it and say that it, I only have what students, say to me, and pretty uniformly I've had really positive results. Yeah, Jacqueline?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for this. I really, really like it. And I think that I am going to try it. I want to know what maybe some of your negative experiences have been, and I can tell you that if you've had any, and just sort of hearkening back to the coddling of the American mind, I have students in my class right now. I was going to ask the autism question as well, because I do have a student who is autistic who I can't get to participate in groups or exchanges really of any kind. In fact, I'm going to be talking to disability services about how I can be of better service to this student, because I really am not equipped to do the job. But I can really see a student complaining that they have been forced into this traumatic forced intimacy. And I remember the idea of looking into this was a couples thing. You would look into one another's eyes for 2 minutes, to reground yourself and to intimatize yourself, and it was kind of creepy even then. And what about the what about those kinds of, or have you had those kinds of reactions, and what might you or other people say to I was very uncomfortable being forced to have a man stare at me and me stare at a man, or I was I was unprepared for this and this is not appropriate, and I have been, this is violating da, 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 da.
I haven't had that.
Okay.
So I haven't had that.
I'm astonished by the way that you haven't, but congratulations and God bless you. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And so I have not that I'm aware of. And I mean, I do say this at so I typically do this on the second class session. And so the first class session that I frame for students is that they're going to sing publicly, that this class is going to make them uncomfortable. It's going to be outside their comfort zone. They're going to talk to strangers. I'm going to have them take cold showers. You're going to be doing things that make you feel uncomfortable. And if that's not for you, this is not the right class. So I kind of put a pretty firm line that, I mean, for me, a foundational principle of how I teach leadership is that, I mean, if you have courage, then you can be a fearless learner. You can have difficult conversations. You can take risks. You can go after things you didn't think you could do. You can put yourself out there. And so the notion of building courage is foundational in the class. So I start off with that as like and so I say that if you feel uncomfortable and you feel outside your comfort zone, those are all good things because you're doing the things that you need to do to continue to grow. And if that's not something that you want to do, then this is not that place. So that's typically how I have that first class. Then the second class is this. And it's like, it's like forcing them to, I guess my response, like if somebody said that, I'd be like, there are kids that go like this the whole time too, that are trying to like avoid, right? They look around and everything else like that. So, if you really didn't want to take an eye contact, I'm not standing over them and like, do it, right? They'll look away, right? And so I just feel like they're going to be adults. And if that's really, really something that's personally significant for them that they don't need to do, then don't do it. But that's been my experience.
It's I really, really, really appreciate your response. That is so helpful because, this semester, I would not by this point in the semester dare to do this. But next semester, I'm teaching a course on innovation and risk and failure and things like this. And yeah, I will start my class that way. That will be class number 1. Yeah, I will start by setting that tone because I think it's important and it's a great way to frame it and then to lead into things like this. So thank you very much.
And there's great research on if I find the article, I'll share it out with the HXA folks, but framing experiences that the uncomfortableness and the awkwardness and the stress is a sign that it's working and that it's a good thing is really generative to people. So I always try to I try to say that if you are not feeling this, then something's wrong. Because you are not going outside your comfort zone to take some risks and everything else. So I have my students, they got to talk to 20 strangers and just make small talk with 20 strangers, and they find that awkward. So I'm all about that. So thank you for that. Other questions? So Elena, would you adapt this in any way to conduct with older students and professional programming and folks working together professionally, like a group of faculty? I've done it with faculty and staff. I think it's really interesting because you can have a moving conversation and like a close conversation with someone who works down the hall that you've always passed, but you've never really met. I'll say this. I ran this exercise with a group of executives in a leadership experience here in Kalamazoo from across the city. And I had someone come up to me like a year later and they said that, oh, I remember your exercise. And he's like, that exercise like changed my life because I had this most amazing conversation with this other individual, and now they're best friends and everything else. And he's like, and he wanted to thank me for that. So I think it works with everyone, has been my experience. Let's see, Mark. Coach or student athletes. Yeah, I mean, all your. I think my experiences has worked with everybody. I haven't tried it with little kids. I should say that. So maybe not that. But other settings has all been very positive. I might be protested, Patrick. Yeah, it might be. Those things might be protested. Part of me says is that this is the class and this is the way it's going to be, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and deal with it. And if you don't want to take this class, take another professor. I mean, that's what I do. It's like, this is the way it's going to be, and you're not going to like it. And I'm going to have you do some things that you really probably don't want to do. And if that's not for you, then don't take this. And that's my mentality. And what I find is all the students are super positive about it. They take that on. They get, and I don't know, do I trash talk them? I'm like, oh, you guys are soft. I mean, compared to my students pre-COVID, you guys complain, you say things are unfair, blah, blah, blah. I kind of just give them that. I'm like, prove me wrong. And I find that they just react well to that, has been my experience. Mark, could you situate the method in relation to other comparable techniques? That's a really good question. So I have actually on my, there's this kind of interesting right here, actually. I bought it online. It's the Meaningful Relationships collection. And you have Cherish, Connect, and Laugh. And you can pull out these cards, and it's a conversational game. And I've done this with students. And you have these like little things little cards you have to do, and you can hand them out to people, and you have to kind of get through a scripted thing and kind of ask each other different questions. That's been kind of a fun exercise I've used as well. What I found in terms of other techniques, my experience, I don't know if this is accurate, is that a lot of them tend towards the framing of like, we're going to have a difficult conversation. We're going to divide, cross divides. We're going to, see things from different, and it starts off with this like weird, like premise of like, we're divided. And I like starting from like, we're going to have a good conversation, and we're going to get to know one another and what's going on and what your life is like and who are you. And I feel like that's been pretty positive. Great. Well, I think they'll be sharing out the conversation guide, the facilitation guide, as well as my email. I would love to hear how it works in your classes. I would love to hear how it works in a in a calculus class. I would love to hear how it works in terms of pairing it with improv. And hopefully it does good things. Let me know how it works for you.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you, everyone. We will have the recording up on our website. If you go to the For Members menu and view member workshops and log in, you'll be able to see this workshop and all of our other workshops if you may have missed them, and you can rewatch and learn from all these workshops. So we'll have another one coming next month as well. So keep an eye on your email and just make sure you're subscribed to our emails to receive those invites. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.